Hello and welcome to another edition of This Moment. My name is Pastor Jeremy. I pastor Encounter Life Church, a part of the network of churches of Griffin First Assembly. If you don't have a home church and you would love to check us out sometime, we have 6 locations here in Georgia. You can do so by checking us out online at griffinfirst.org. We'd love to make you feel right at home. Well, I hope to encourage you today through a message right from the Word of God. It's called Give It One More Chance. Give it one more chance. I'm going to be hanging out for the next few moments. If you'd like to get your Bible, I'm going to be in Luke chapter 13 about a very fascinating story right here that I believe will encourage us today. Here in Luke chapter 13, I'm going to dip in at verse 6. It says this, "Then Jesus told this story. A man planted a fig tree in his garden and came again and again to see if there was any fruit on it. But he was always disappointed. Finally, he said to the gardener, 'I've waited 3 years and there hasn't been a single fig. Cut it down. It's just taking up space in this garden.' The gardener answered and said, 'Sir, give it one more chance. Leave it another year and I'll give it special attention and plenty of fertilizer.' You see, this tree had been in the garden for some time, and year after year the landowner came to check on the fruit of this tree, and finally the landowner said, 'This tree has taken up space. It's faithful, it stays planted, it's still alive, but it's not fruitful.' See, that tree for the last 3 years had been faithful, but not fruitful. I think many times in our own life, we feel like, 'God, I'm faithful, but I'm not seeing the fruit of this thing come out in my life.' The landowner was ready to cut it down, but the gardener said this, 'Just give it one more chance. Just give it one more chance.' There's a great composer named Ludwig van Beethoven. Many of us know Beethoven, the great composer. Beethoven lived much of his life with the fear of losing his hearing. There was an incident that happened in his life, and his ears started to ring, and he began to lose the sense of hearing. And he knew that the sense of hearing, so he thought, was essential to creating music of lasting value. Beethoven soon realized the thing that he feared the most soon became a reality. Beethoven would go on to lose most of his hearing, if not all, at a certain time. And so Beethoven finally found the strength to go on. He got away and he found the strength to go on, and he decided to give it one more chance, even after losing his hearing. And despite his great loss, and to everyone's amazement, Beethoven wrote some of his greatest music after he had become deaf. Imagine if he hadn't given it one more chance. It's amazing what happens when we decide, 'God, I know I've lost some things. I know, God, I've just been faithful in a season. God, it doesn't look perfect. The conditions haven't been great, but God, I'm willing to give it one more chance.' You know what I found? That on the other side of my one more chance, God can do way more in my one more. God can do way more in my one more. Imagine if the great composer Beethoven would have stopped because he felt like, 'I can't be fruitful anymore. I can't produce music anymore because I've lost my sense of hearing.' But Beethoven would write in a letter to his friends, he said, 'I found that in this silence and in this time, melodies began to flood my mind and my heart.' And he began to compose with an advantage. There was an advantage in that adversity, and he began to understand that he could go and give it one more chance and one more shot. I want to encourage you today to give it one more chance. One more chance. Like the gardener said, give it one more chance, one more year, and let me put some fertilizer on it. You know what you got to do in times where you always don't see fruit produced in your life? You have to learn, like the gardener said, you have to stop counting the days and start counting the seasons. Stop counting just the days. Notice the gardener didn't say, "Sir, give it one more day." He didn't say, "Give it one more week." He didn't say, "Give it one more month." What did he say? "Give it one more year." See, the problem is if you begin to count your days and don't learn to count your seasons, many times the days look hard, don't they? Many times the days and the weeks strung together, they seem hard. They feel hard. The last several months in the middle of a pandemic, it's been a hard time for the people of God, for the people all around the world, really. And if you only count certain days and certain weeks and certain months, those things seem hard. It's like me when I go back to working out. My gym has been closed, and I know how it feels to go back to working out and back to lifting weights. You know what happens? If I just count the days of working out, you know what happens? I'll go in and lift real hard and strain real hard, and I'll come out of the gym, and I won't see many results. I won't see that my biceps are any bigger. I won't see that I've created any progress. In fact, the only thing that I feel is sore. I don't see any results, and I feel sore. And you know what? I have to keep going back, don't I, to see those results. And if I only counted the days, I might give up after a week of working out. Maybe you're like that. You try to start working out, and you don't see any difference in a day, in a week, not even maybe many times in a month. But if you know what, if you'll remain faithful to that workout regimen, you'll begin to look back over the course of a season, over several months, after a year. If you've been faithful in the season that God's called you to be in, you can look back over your life and over the days that seemed hard, and you can start to see progress. I came to encourage somebody, don't just count the days. Don't just count the weeks. Begin to look back and count the seasons. You see, I've had many hard days and I've had many hard weeks, but every time I go to look back over every season of my life, you know what I find? I find that God has been faithful in every season. That somehow I had some hard days and I had some hard weeks, but as I just kept trusting God and I just kept giving it one more chance, when I look back over every season of my life, I can't help but see the faithfulness and the goodness of God. David wrote in Psalms 23, he said, His goodness and His mercy, they follow me all the days of my life. David was saying, when I look back over the course of my life, yeah, there were some times that were hard. There were some times David ran for his life. There were some times David hid in caves. But when he looked back, he couldn't help but see the goodness and the mercy of God following him all the days of his life. You see, when you're like that tree, you've got to give it one more chance. Don't just look for a huge improvement maybe in a day or in a week, but learn how in your life to count seasons. Learn how to count seasons. If you don't learn how to count seasons in your life, you'll feel frustrated after a few days of faithfulness. You'll give up on the workout routine. You'll give up trying to go back to school. You'll give up trying to write that book. You'll give up on a relationship that God wants you to be committed to. You'll give up after a few days, but say, I'm going to be faithful for one more year. I'm going to be faithful for another season. Learn how to count seasons in your life. You know, my mom got cancer. And she had a bad report. It was stage 3C cancer. And I was just entering into college. And you know, my mom, she's tough. She was strong. I remember she was the one who was comforting us around her bedside after the diagnosis. She's just that kind of mom. And so she was being strong, and she said, God's going to see us through. She had many hard days, but she believed that God would touch her body. And I'm here to tell you today, my mom is a walking, living, breathing miracle. But she understood I'm going to have some hard days. But after time, I believe God is going to see me through this thing. My mom's alive and well today because she knew that she had some hard days ahead. But she knew if she would just give it a year, give it 2 years. Finally, they gave her a report of you have no more cancer in your body. It wasn't easy. Many times it was tough. But my mom understood it's going to be a season that looks hard. But now she looks back after 10 years, and she is still cancer-free, all to the glory of God. Learn how to count a season. Learn how to think in seasons. Don't just think about it day to day. We've got to be like Elisha. Elisha told a woman who didn't have a baby in 2 Kings 4. And this lady didn't have a baby, and she was taking care of the man of God. And he looked at her, and he said, about this time next year, you will hold a son. About this time next year. I came to encourage somebody. It might not look great right now. In fact, it might be a hard day, a hard week, a couple of hard months. But I'm here to tell you, you don't know what God could do in a year. Elisha told the lady in 2 Kings 4:16, about this time next year, you will hold a son in your arms. In this time next year, you could be holding that thing that's only a dream right now. You could, if you're committed to a workout regimen, you'll look a whole lot better 1 year from now. Hang on, keep pushing through. Learn how to count seasons in your life. Number 2, you're going to have to stop making comparisons and start making some fertilizer. Notice in that story that the landowner came out and he was looking at that tree and it wasn't producing any fruit. And I'm sure all the trees around it, they were producing fruit. And he got frustrated with this tree. He said, this tree's not producing any fruit. Cut it down. But I'm so thankful that there was a gardener and said, I'll tell you what, give it another year. Don't compare it to everything else in this garden, but let me put fertilizer. Let me pay special attention to this tree. See, the gardener understood something many of us miss, that you can't make comparisons to all other trees and everyone else's fruit in the garden. See, to compare yourself to what someone else has is to insult what God has given you. Every time I compare myself to those around me and other pastors and other leaders, and I say, you know, it's easy for me to say they lead at a bit higher level. They preach so much better than I do. The way they have a marriage is so much better than the way I do my marriage. It's easy if I start comparing everything, but God didn't give me their marriage. God didn't give me their ministry. God didn't give me their tree to grow in their place. God gave me my own life and my own tree to where I've got to focus on me. I can't compare myself to somebody else's fruit. There might not be fruit in certain areas of my life, but I've got to be like the gardener and say, I've got to tend to this tree and give it my own fertilizer, just like in that story. You know, when you begin to fertilize your dreams and fertilize your marriage and fertilize your calling and the destiny of your life, I don't know if you've ever done any gardening or any farming, but fertilizer is made of compost. Fertilizer is made of manure. Fertilizer is made of some stuff you want to wash your hands after you get done dealing with it. Can I tell you something? When you begin to fertilize the things that God has put in your life, it doesn't look pretty. It doesn't look easy. It's not Facebook worthy. It's not Instagram worthy or social media worthy. Many times when you begin to fertilize the things in your life, it's hard work. It looks like sweat. It looks painful. Because guess what? Many times it is. When you begin to fertilize a dream, sometimes that looks like reading another 3 books on the dream God's given you. When you're fertilizing a marriage, sometimes that looks like marriage counseling or going to somebody and say, hey, I respect your marriage. I like your marriage. Can you sit down with my wife and I? We need some help. That's hard stuff. It's hard stuff to begin to fertilize your marriage. It's hard, but it's necessary if you're going to produce fruit in the next season. If God's called you to fertilize your calling, sometimes that calling might be to go get another degree, to maybe attend a night class and do something on the side. Why? So you can fertilize the calling of God in your life. Is it easy? No. But is it necessary? Yes. For you to produce fruit in the next season, you've got to learn to fertilize those things in this season. Again, many times when you begin to fertilize, it doesn't look pretty. It's not easy, but it is necessary. And you might say, well, Jeremy, I don't have the time and I don't have maybe the fortitude to fertilize it. You know what I've learned in life? Many people have $1 million dreams, but $100 work ethics. The dreams inside of them could be worth millions of dollars someday, but they don't have but $100 work ethic. I've come to find that I've got to have faith with works. Faith without works, the Bible tells us, is dead. But if my faith will bring my works up to what I'm believing God for, then all of a sudden I begin working and saying, God, I believe the thing in my life is a multi-million-dollar invention, or maybe it's a $100,000 dream. But here's the thing. I've got to look into my life and say, does my works match my faith? And see, it's in those times that I have to work those things out in my own life and say, if I'm believing God for this, I've got to be willing to take the time and fertilize it. I've got to be willing to do do the hard things, but the necessary things so that I can have fruit in a later season. One of my favorite movies growing up is, I like the original, by the way. It's called The Karate Kid. The Karate Kid. If you remember The Karate Kid, it was about this guy named Daniel, and he was getting beat up, and he wanted to learn martial arts, and he sought out this guy named Mr. Miyagi. Oh, it's such a classic story. And he came to Mr. Miyagi, and he wanted to become great at karate. He wanted to become somebody who could stand up for himself. That was his plan, and this is his goal. But when he came to Mr. Miyagi said, I'll tell you what, I just really want you to paint my fence. He said, paint your fence? I want to learn karate. He said, oh, but my fence needs painted. Daniel's son started painting the fence, and he corrected his form. And he said, finally, Mr. Miyagi, I've painted your fence. Mr. Miyagi says, wax my car. So he goes and he starts waxing the car. Mr. Miyagi had to show him a better way of doing it. You know, wax on, wax off. And then finally, when he's done with the car, Mr. Miyagi said, I need you to sand my floor. Daniel was getting frustrated. I said, are you kidding me? I came to learn karate. I came to pursue this dream in my life, to become great at karate, to defend myself and to compete in these competitions. All that you have me doing is a bunch of work. You're just making me make your house look better, so to speak. One day, Daniel gets frustrated, and it's such a classic movie. He said, I'm done. I'm done with this. I'm done with doing the things of fertilizer for you. I'm done fixing up your property. Mr. Miyagi said, okay, now paint the fence. And he threw a kick and a jab, and next thing you know, he was waxing on and waxing off and blocking kicks. And the things he was learning to do while painting the fence and sanding the floor and waxing the car turned out to be the very moves he needed, the very things he needed to become great at karate. See, what he didn't know is while it felt like fertilizer, it felt like hard work. What he didn't realize, it was muscle memory. It was learning all the moves he needed to learn how to fight and learn how to be great at karate. You know, I've found that to be true in many places of my life, that many times it feels like sanding the floor and painting the fence and waxing the car, and it feels hard. But I know God's asked me to do it. And I have to believe that, God, if you've asked me to do it, then Father, you're going to use this thing. Romans 8:28, you're going to work all these things together for my good. You're going to work these things together for my good. Why? Because I'm called according to your purpose. You have to live beyond your purpose, your desire, and what you feel like is necessary. If God's called you to it, be faithful to it. Learn how to fertilize that thing in your life. Again, it's not fun, it's not Facebook worthy, but it's necessary in our life. You know, the King James, if you read this scripture in the King James, it says this. I love the old language. It says, I'll dung it. The gardener says, I'll dung it. Isn't that funny? You know, sometimes I've learned in life the dung comes not just from the things in my life, but it comes from things where people have cursed me. And people have put me down, and people have not believed in me. Sometimes the dung comes from my own life. Sometimes it's because people throw it on me. You know what? I believe that God can take every negative situation and every curse ever spoken over you, and He can work it together for good in your life. I have a learning disability called dyslexia. I didn't always feel smart. In fact, I was made fun of in school. I still think about those kids making fun of me. College was necessary for my calling. And I can remember those kids. They say, you can't read well. You can never go to college and do well. But you know what? It was hard for me, but it was necessary. And I found that along the way, God gave me the grace to graduate and get my degree. You see, Genesis 50:20 is about Joseph. His brothers had thrown him in a pit and sold him into slavery. Joseph looks at him, and his brothers one day when he had come into the kingdom, he said, you know what? You meant those things for evil, but God meant those things for good in my life and for the saving of many. You know, many times the dung in our life has been thrown on us from other people. But let God work those things into the fertilizer of your soil so that you can come back years later and see fruit on your tree, because God worked those things in the foundation of your life for your good and for His glory. Not only are you going to have to fertilize it, not just count the days and the weeks, but learn to count seasons and learn how to make fertilizer in your life. The third thing you have to do is surround yourself with gardeners in your life to give your dream one more chance. You know, the landowner was ready to cut it down, but I'm sure that tree, if it could have talked, would have been thankful for the gardener. It said, tell you what, let me give it one more chance. You know, I've found in life, it's important for me to have gardeners like that in my life. To say, you know what, Jeremy, give it one more chance. See, accountability is this. Accountability is somebody in your life who knows what you're capable of, but also knows what you're called to. And somebody who knows what you're capable of, but knows what you're called to. I'm so thankful that along the way, I've had people in my life to hold me accountable. Accountable to the things God's put in my heart in life, no matter how hard a season might get, no matter if there's any fruit on the tree. I remember I missed out on passing 2 classes in college. I missed out 2. In fact, these 2 classes kept me from graduating on time. I had to take an extra semester. But you know what? I thought that was the worst thing that happened to me. It was in my field of study, in Christian ministries. After all, God's calling me to be a pastor, and I failed 2 classes in that study. You talk about feeling like a failure and feeling like, God, I don't know what's going on. And I felt like giving up, as crazy as that sounds, after all that I've been through. But I had people in my life saying, Jeremy, give it one more semester. Give it one more season. Give it another chance. You know what? You know who I met in the next season, in that next semester of my life? I met this beautiful blonde girl named Caitlin. She encouraged me, and she said, hey, I believe in you. Give it this semester. Give it another chance. Because of that extra semester, I met my now wife. My wife, I met her in that season. You see, I was ready to give up. I was ready to throw in the towel and be crazy to call it quits. But God used that extra time for good in my life, and I met my wife. Let me tell you something. I would have failed an entire year of classes just to have had the chance to meet her. God is so good, isn't He? He can work all these things together for our good. But we've got to have gardeners in our life to say, you know what? Give it one more chance. Give it one more shot. Don't give up on your dream right now. You know what? Many times I feel like we give up in life because we don't have the right people in our life. If you're going to make it in life, there's some people who throw the wrong stuff at you. But you need to find somebody who believes in what God is calling you to. Surround yourself with good people who can call out those things in your life and encourage you to give it another year, to give it one more chance. You know, I was struggling at one time when I was a kid, maybe 19 or 20 years old. And I had a great battle in my life. Excuse me. I had a great battle in my life, and I was struggling through some things of clinical depression and some things that happened in my life to where I broke my arm. I wasn't even able to play basketball or to work out or go running. I had a great staph infection in my body. And I didn't have a great report, and it kept me from doing many of the things I love to do, work out and run. And for an entire year, I got really depressed, and I really struggled with God's call on my life to be a pastor. And I remember my dad called me, and one time I was talking to him on the phone, and I said, Dad, I don't know if I can give God the rest of my life. This stuff, it's so hard. And I remember my dad, he was the gardener that day in my life, and he said this to me. He said, Jeremy, do you think you could give God the rest of the day? I said, yeah, Dad, I could give God the rest of the day. He says, Jeremy, do you think you could give Him tomorrow morning? I said, yeah, Dad, I think I could give God tomorrow morning. He said, Jeremy, do you feel like you could give God the rest of that afternoon? I said, yeah, Dad, I think I could do that. He said, you know what? Do you think you could give God next week? I said, Dad, I probably could give God a week. He said, see, son, what I'm saying is the way you give God the rest of your life is just by giving Him today. You know, I found that to be so true. I didn't know how I was going to make it for a year at a time. I didn't even know sometimes how I was going to make it a month at a time. But I knew this. I could give God my day. I could give Him my daily habits. I could say, God, I trust You with this moment. God, I trust You with this assignment. God, I trust You today. So I would encourage you right now as you're looking into your life, give God this moment. Give God this day. September 7th, 1892, one of the greatest boxers of all time, his name was Gentleman James Cobert. Gentleman James Cobert, one of the greatest boxers of all time. He did something nobody has ever done. You see, Gentleman James, he was able to win the heavyweight champion of the world in bare-knuckle boxing. And in the very next year, when they started glove boxing, to win the heavyweight championship of the world. He's the reigning champ of bare-knuckle boxing, and he got the championship on the other side of it with the glove boxing. You know what? I love it so much. You know what Gentleman James Cobert did with his winnings that second year? It's recorded that he gave the prize money to his church. Don't you love it? He gave the prize money to his church. That was a great year of boxing in his life. But maybe one of the most fantastic years of boxing he ever had was, in fact, maybe the year before. You see, the year before, he ran into this guy named Peter Black Prince Jackson. Peter Black Prince Jackson and Gentleman James Cobert, they went hand-to-hand combat, and they fought after round after round after round. In fact, if you look up the fight, you find that the fight lasted 61 rounds. That's amazing. That's before boxing had a limit on the rounds. I think even greater than winning the heavyweight championship of the world in bare-knuckle boxing and then in glove boxing was what happened when he fought for 61 rounds. But you see, he had a motto in his life, and it's a famous motto many people know today. But his motto was simply this: fight one more round. He said, when your feet are so tired that you have to shuffle back to the center of the ring, fight one more round. When your arms are so tired you can hardly lift your hands to come on guard, fight one more round. See, when your nose is bleeding and your eyes are black and blue and you're so tired you wish your opponent would give you a good crack across the face, he said, fight one more round. He said, remembering this, remembering that the man or the woman who fights one more round will never be whipped. I came to encourage somebody today, fight one more round. Proverbs 24:16 tells us, for the righteous fall 7 times, but they rise again. Let me pray for you today. Father, I pray that your people, Father, would be encouraged by this. I pray that, Father, they would give their life to you in this moment. Giving your life to Jesus begins with a simple prayer that will last eternity. Just say, God, I trust you with my life. I want to give you my life. Father, give me the strength to live one more day, to fight one more round, to fertilize the dreams and callings of God you've put in my life, to believe, God, that a year from now I can begin to see fruit on the tree of my life. Father, I thank you for those who gave their life to you. And Father, for those who are rising up today, this day, and saying, God, I'm going to give it one more chance. God, I pray that you would take your word and anoint it now. Let it produce fruit in people's life. In Jesus' name I pray.